Mr. Kevin Whitman, hello, and thank you for joining us today.
It's a privilege to be here. Thanks
Absolutely.
for asking me.
Awesome. This is Kevin Whitman of the Mission Increase Foundation, and we also share in common that we're both Life Pacific alumni.
Correct.
And we both participate in the nonprofit space here in the greater Portland metro area, but from your position at the Mission Increase Foundation, you've got a unique insight into the lives of many different nonprofits, as well as the means and the techniques that they use to go about funding the vision that God has given them. So we want to talk a lot about that, but give us a little insight into Kevin Whitman, the person, and how you came into the role that you have now.
Okay, well, I was raised in a pastor's home, which one of the things I've always said that has been so helpful in helping me stay in ministry is the fact that I grew up in ministry and actually knew what the cost was going into it. I didn't go to Bible college and then all of a sudden realize this isn't what I signed up for.
Are you suggesting that there's a high cost to being in ministry?
There is a definite high cost to being in ministry, and I'm grateful that I had that modeled to me at a young age. So was raised in a pastor's home, went to Bible college myself. That in and of itself is an interesting story because originally I can't say I rebelled against it, but I was resistant to the idea simply because I didn't want to go into the family business. And God made it really clear that that was the path he had for me. So yes, we're Life Pacific alumni. And after my graduation, I worked down in California for a few years and then moved back up here to Oregon where I was mostly raised and was in ministry positions here in Portland. Found my wife, married her, 3 kids, did a church plant.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And then after God made it really clear that the season for the church plant was over, I went into development work, so went into the fundraising sector. And that was an interesting transition for me simply because so much of my identity had been wrapped up in being a pastor. So very interesting transition for me, but very instrumental.
Okay, so can you reflect on that for me for a little
Sure.
bit? Because I've been in several conversations recently where this idea of in or out of ministry has come up, given what kind of career path. Now, as somebody who was quite obviously in ministry as a pastor, now moving to a field that is certainly not that, but it's adjacent to it, how has your own self-understanding evolved? And would you say that you're still, I'm using air quotes here, in ministry, even though you're not drawing a payroll from a church?
Well, absolutely. In fact, I would go so far as to say, and I say it all the time, is I feel that I'm actually doing way more pastoring now than I did when I held the title of pastor. And the reason is I believe that we are pastors, not that that is always our vocation, but it's who we are. It's who God created us to be. So my heart for being a pastor has never changed. My vocation of being a pastor, and I'll use air quotes now, is that may have changed, but my heart never did. And that's one of those things that whatever it is that God has called you to do, whether that is in a pastoral role or it's in a support role, or quite frankly, if you've called you to be a mechanic or an attorney, are you seeing yourself as a pastor in that role? Yeah. And that really is the heart of caring for people and being able to lead them in a deeper relationship with Jesus. So I don't think that you ever stop being a pastor. Yeah. It's something that just is ingrained in who it is that we are. And for me, because I had been raised in that, I'd been in a pastoral role for so long, the biggest challenge for me was, where do I separate identity issues of who I am with what it is that I do? So that was the journey that God took me through during that. It was quite a process, quite a learning process for me, but so grateful that God did bring me through that. And so about 10 years ago now, went into development work and worked for an organization here in the region that dealt with domestic abuse prevention and recovery. So that was one of those that certainly is not a nice light subject that you deal with, but at the same time was incredibly fulfilling. And then through that opened the door for me to come to Mission Increase. And now I just celebrated my 6-year anniversary with Mission Increase. And what we get to do is we get to help ministries and ministry leaders learn how to become sustainable and grow in their fundraising using biblical principles.
I grew up in an environment where discussing money was taboo. And so around that came a lot of hush hush, and there may be some shame even about who had it, who didn't. And I never really saw it handled well. So what would you say, help us first frame this in the context of what would you say is a biblical way to think about money?
Okay. Well, first of all, when we look at the scripture, we know that Jesus talked a great deal about money.
Yes.
He spent a lot of time talking about it. And one of the reasons why I believe he did that is because so much of who we are, so much of what we think, so much of identity can be wrapped up in what we perceive we have or we don't have.
Yes.
There's also a huge stronghold with money that God is always working in our life to help us understand that he is the ultimate provider and that he will always provide. So when it comes to the whole concept of money and asking people for money or talking about money, I believe that as a church, I'll use the big C, church, on that we have a responsibility to start opening up the conversation about it.
Okay.
Because if Jesus talked about it, it's not an off-the-table subject.
Truly.
And so what are we saying about it? What are we communicating about it? Even as parents, what are we teaching our children about it? How are we talking to them about it? How are we helping them to learn how to make money decisions? How are we learning to help them learn to become givers? And so there's so much there. So when it comes to the whole concept of money, God wants to deal with our heart first. And one of the things that we talk about so much at Mission Increase is that God has called people to a life of generosity and abundance. And if we are wanting to experience that abundance, then God also wants to teach us the other side of generosity. Are we living as generous people? Are we living as givers? Are we living our own life in a way that we are freely giving of what it is that we have? Yes, I'm talking about our money. Yes, I'm talking about our time. Yes, I'm talking about all of those things. But the money that we have is a big thing. The dollars that we have are a big thing. And what is God calling us to do with that?
Yes. Yeah. That's a great place to begin, thinking about how Jesus opened the pathway for us to begin talking about money perhaps more than we do.
Correct.
But within the context of so many of the warnings in the New Testament show the dark side to money.
Absolutely.
Right? And yet, many of the ministries that we all participate in wouldn't be around if it wasn't for people who had, if you will, above average means.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we reconcile, or how do we think about kind of the New Testament witness around money, Jesus speaking about it a lot, with, say, approaching someone who is of high net worth, or has the potential to be able to give generously? How should we approach a conversation like that?
Okay, well, you're opening up a whole nother can of worms there. So we're going to probably now have to shift just a little bit in our conversation with that question, because that now deals with motivation. And it deals with our motivation.
Sure.
And so, again, coming from my perspective of being at Mission Increase, I'm probably going to have to answer your question with a little bit of framing so that the answer does make sense. So when we are approaching somebody who would have the potential to give, what's our motivation for approaching them?
To get their money, of course.
Okay. So if we're approaching them to get their money, are we approaching them to get their money so they'll support what I'm doing? So are we saying, I'm doing a great thing, I'm involved in ministry, will you support me in ministry so I can go out and minister to people? Or are we saying, you've got means and a heart, I've got the ability, the time, and the heart. Together, we can make a great team in seeing great ministry happen.
Oh, so that's a big shift.
It's a huge shift. And that's one, like I said, I can't just answer your question at face value without going back a little bit and saying, we've got to establish a context here of what we're talking about. And quite frankly, what we're talking about, and I'll use some mission increase terminology just because that's what I go back to, is we've got traditional transactional fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
And that says, I'm doing a great thing. I need your money to continue and go do my great thing. And it may be a great thing.
Of course.
But I need your money so I can go and do this. Transformational giving says, God's placed a call on your life. He's placed a call on my life. And together, when we work together, we can accomplish amazing things for the kingdom. So it really is in asking that person who may have potential to give generously, what's our motivation for asking them? Is it because ideally God's got something for them and a call on their life, and by connecting in, that's going to help fulfill the call that God has placed on their life? Yeah. It's not using them to fulfill my call, but it's collectively together can we help each other fulfill our individual calls.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
That's a massive shift in framework and thinking around the whole notion of even asking to begin with.
Absolutely. In fact, again, going back to what we teach at Mission Increase, we have 10 transformational giving principles that guide all of our work. And one of those says that the liberating nature of generosity, and that in and of itself is a huge mouthful, right? The liberating nature of generosity means that asking people to give is a sacred task.
Unpack that a little bit more.
Okay,
What
so
does that
what
mean?
we're saying is that so much of our culture, and quite frankly, it was true in Jesus' day as well, or he wouldn't have talked about money as much as he did. But so much of our culture is wrapped up in money as identity. If we have it or we don't have it, or how much of it that we do have. And when we are asking someone to give, and when quite frankly we are looking at fundraising as ministry, there's a mindset shift. Mm-hmm. If we're looking at fundraising as ministry, to realize when I'm asking you to lay down a false security, yes, and to truly put everything that you have in God's hands and possibly be generous over here in a way that he's calling you to be generous, the growth that's going to happen in you as a result of that, and what God takes you through, the process that he does in you, it's a sacred task to be involved in that. Yeah. So it's no longer me asking you to give of something so I can go and do this. It's now God's actually using the process of asking you to grow you and to be more like him in that process. It's the growth of Christ likeness that's coming out in you in that process. By asking, I'm now involved in that process with you.
You become an agent in which God brings about greater transformation in the life of the giver.
Okay, so now we have just completely shifted from I'm asking you to give money so I can go and do my work to we're co-ministers together in this. And just the process of asking you and the process of you giving as God directs and being generous, that's resulting in incredible spiritual growth in you.
Yeah.
So that to me changes the entire conversation. That's why through what it is that we get to do and the ministry leaders that we work with, we see such incredible growth happen in them as people first. Yeah. So that, in fact, that's one thing I can't let pass in this conversation is for anybody listening to this, anybody involved with Canby Bible College and however far-reaching this may go, recognize really clearly, God did not call you to the work that he's called you to because of your skill set. He will use your skill set, but that's not the primary motivator for why he called you. The primary motivator for why he called you is because he wants to do something in you. So it's not because of your skill set. He'll use it. He created it. He's not going to waste it. But it's not the primary reason. The primary reason he calls you is because he wants to do something in you.
Wow.
And when we fully understand that, then everything that we're involved in, regardless of the depth of it or the topic of it, we know that part of what it is that God's doing in us is accomplishing his full work in us. First and foremost, you are a believer in Jesus Christ. Prior to any of the work that he's called you to do, you are a believer first. And ultimately, God's going to grow you as a believer first. Secondarily, he will grow you in your skills.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for that massive shift in the way that a lot of what I've received about how to raise money has been that transactional nature.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that you're proposing here is a transformational partnership that exists between the giver and the doer, where suddenly those terms lose their significance because now there's a healthy partnership for the work that's now blessing both agents in that process as well.
Absolutely.
Both the person who has the financial resources and the one who goes out and he does it. So let's continue on this track. You mentioned 10 transformational giving principles.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other kind of framework or conceptual things that we need to get our thinking straight on when it comes to money and fundraising?
Okay, well, one of the ones that I would absolutely say right at the outset, and one of the guiding principles that we have, is the fact that every act of giving is first and foremost a statement about the faithfulness of God.
Every act of giving is a statement about the faithfulness of God. Okay,
right?
Keep going. Keep talking. What
so
does that mean?
I would actually even expand that a little bit. I would say every act of asking, giving, and receiving is a statement about the faithfulness of God. Because when I give, what I'm saying is, God, out of what it is that you've given to me, I'm giving back to you, and I am trusting that you're going to give everything it is that I need. So I'm no longer holding back because this is what it is that I have and this is what's going to meet my need. I'm now giving generously to you, knowing you're faithful. You're committed to me. You've promised me that you'll take care of me. And so when I give, I'm saying you're faithful. When I ask, I'm asking because I know that God's faithful. When I receive, I can receive because I know that God is faithful. So every act of giving is first and foremost a statement about the faithfulness of God. And we believe that God is a generous God, and that we do not have to ask with a theology of scarcity, with a poverty mentality, because quite frankly, God already owns it all. And when I work with the ministry leaders that I do, and we're talking about fundraising and the workshops that I have the privilege of teaching, we'll say at almost every single one of those, you want some good news? Every ministry represented here in this room, and every other one that's not represented here, God is able to provide everything that every single one of us needs at exactly the same time. He's not limited to what it is that he has. He is not limited to his resources. And when we ask and when we give and when we receive, we don't have to do that from a posture of scarcity, but understanding God is faithful. And I am simply making a statement about his faithfulness in that. So as you can see, this topic I can get a little passionate about. And honestly, I can say, James, that the number one reason I get so passionate about it is because I get to have conversations with people almost daily who are in leadership, in asking for funds, and the work God has done in their life, where they've wrestled with this. God's proven himself. God's shown up. God's provided in miraculous ways. And they're different people as a result of that. They're different, which only underscores the fact God didn't call you to this because of your skill set. God wanted to change you. And I am on the forefront, literally, of getting to see that nearly every single day.
I love it.
And that's why I get so passionate about this topic, because when God transforms our mindset, it transforms us from the inside out, and it changes why we do what we do.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing.
I love it. I love it. Okay. I love the enthusiasm and the excitement. I love this conceptual framework about that generosity is an expression of our understanding and our trust in God's faithfulness.
Absolutely.
And trusting that it's not a poverty mentality. It's not a zero-sum game. We don't have to have a posture of competition and exclusivity, that God is a generous God supplying richly to all those who are carrying out his will. Let's take this forward now into, let's do a little case study.
Okay.
Let's say, for instance, that I represent a Bible college graduate who feels the call of God to go plant a church. I've got very little in the way of ministry experience to point to, but I feel confident about the future that I want to go into, and I'm looking now for the first time to build a base of support to be able to go out and start this new work. And let's say maybe it can also be a church planter or a missionary or something like that, but I'm looking as, especially a young person, to go begin building that base of support. I'm sitting in front of you, we're in your office, and I say, Kevin, help me do this well. What kinds of recommendations would you give me?
Okay, well, I don't know where you got that scenario, because certainly it's not one you probably have heard around here at all. But also, it's not an uncommon question.
Sure.
I get that question a lot. In fact, just today, prior to coming here, I was meeting with a ministry that's fairly new. And they said, what do we do? God's given us an amazing call. How do we make this a reality? How do we make this happen? So I really will start answering your question very similarly to how it is that I answered theirs. And I would start with this question. What's the cause and what's the vision? See,
Okay.
people give to vision. So when you're going and saying, I want to go plant a church. Why? Is it the region? Is it the area? Is there a specific call? Is it going to be a youth focus? Is it going to be this? What is it that God's doing in that region? What's the vision? So rather than say to somebody, will you give to me financially so I can go and do this? Which it seems like we had a bit of a conversation at the beginning of this about transactional fundraising,
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Or are we saying the vision for this region or this city or this part of the city is this? And by planting a church and going in and establishing a presence in this place, we believe that God's going to do his work in that region. Will you support that vision? Do you have a call for that? Is that part of what it is that God's laid on your heart? Because if he's called you to be involved in something over here, here's a way for that calling on your life to be fulfilled as well at the same time.
Okay, so again, kind of a mind-blowing kind of reversal of expectation here. Historically, I would have imagined that meeting to go something like, I just graduated Bible school, and I'm really lit for Jesus, and I've got this great vision, and I'm going to go do a thing. Will you help cover my rent and utilities?
Right.
But what you're saying is, no, that what activates generosity in the hearts of givers is the connection between the potential of what God can do for a region or an area or a demographic, whatever the segment is, and their desire. And so that call isn't to, what you're doing there, I guess, is you're highlighting the cause, you're highlighting the potential, and more than the need of the person going and doing it.
Correct. What's the vision? What's God going to do? What's he up to?
Sure.
So taking the conversation you just said, now let's modify that.
Okay.
Okay? So same person, same conversation. I just graduated from Bible college. I'm on fire for Jesus. God's called me to do great things for his kingdom. What God's laying on my heart is this region over here, and he's making it really clear that the passion that he's implanted, it's going to be fulfilled over here. I know that you have a soft spot in your heart for over here.
Okay.
And I know that you would love to see just as much change happen over here as I would. Can we partner together to see that change happen? Now, that has just become a different conversation.
Yeah.
Now it's no longer, I'm on fire for Jesus and I need your money. Now it's, I'm on fire for Jesus and you are too. Together, can we see amazing things happen in this region? So now, rather than it being, you fund me to go do this, it's, you may physically not be over there, but you're just as much a part of what's going on over there. And I know that you have a heart for what it is that's going on over there.
Amazing. Okay, so we're talking about emphasizing the cause and the vision.
Cause and vision.
Not the needs of the individual. Yeah, I think it was you who said something like, people give to need meeting ministries,
Correct.
not needy
One of my favorite
ministries.
quotes.
Okay, that was another one of those mind-blowing nuggets. All right, so focus on the cause, the vision, the potential of the partnership. What comes next? What would be a next step?
Okay, so again, with that is, when you're focusing on that, what that's going to result in is you're going to be able to identify the people who have a similar calling. So it's no longer just asking a warm body to support you. It's, who do you know or who do they know that would potentially feel the same way about this? And then it's always going to vision. It's always casting vision. It's, where's God going? Where's he moving? What is it that he's doing? And it's a matter at that point in time of being able to give reports back of what it is that God's doing. So when we talk about fundraising at Mission Increase and we talk about connecting, the word we use, champions, to the cause. Okay. We like that word champion instead of donor.
All right.
Donor just has that connotation. It's just financial, but we believe champions connect in a way broader way than that. So in connecting champions, then there becomes this process of you acknowledge what they did, and then you invite a next step, and you report back. And then that creates the cycle of growing champions in the cause. So when you acknowledge, you took this step, thank you. You report back, this is what happened as a result of that. What's the next step? And here's what blows a lot of people's minds when it comes to fundraising.
I mean, wouldn't the next step obviously be just give again?
Not necessarily.
Tell me.
And that's the point, is people connect into a cause in a variety of ways. They connect in through giving, yes. And we hope that they'll connect in through serving. And we're faith-based. We should probably include praying in that, right?
Sure.
So we've already got 3 categories that people are going to connect in. But let's add a couple more. People also connect in by learning about a cause. So we don't just want to take people's money and have them not grow in connection to that cause, but it's a constant learning curve of the cause and what's happening and what it is that God's doing. And then also there's another thing of are we allowing people to share about their connection to the cause? You've probably heard the term where we want people to be generous in their time, their talent, and their treasure, right?
Yes.
We've heard those 3 T's, time,
Yes.
talent, and treasure. At Mission Increase, we would actually add a 4th T, and we would say testimony. I would prefer that person be connected in multiple ways, because their growth is going to happen exponentially in comparison to somebody who's simply connected in one way.
I love it. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about we give to need meeting ministries.
Correct.
So we want to create a vision that's compelling and find those champions that can meet us in that space to say, together we can do something special. Then as someone does give, we want to acknowledge that gift. We want to thank them for it. And we want to continue to keep thinking about inviting them into deeper levels of engagement.
Correct.
Different kinds of next steps. Okay. But we're overlooking a very key thing that for an introvert like me who would have a lot of fearfulness
Right.
about walking into that conversation. One, I mean, this assumes a healthy relational network of people who have the means to be able to do that. But let's just say we have found somebody like that, and they will take our phone call, and they will meet us for coffee. And I, again, don't have a lot of history to show about the great things that I've done before in the past, but I know so strongly that God's got me in the future. how do I prepare for and behave in that meeting where I'm going to ask somebody to champion the cause that God has given?
Okay, great question. The way I would answer that would be, just like you spend time preparing and learning to do things that you want to grow in, spend time preparing for this conversation. I would go so far as to say, oftentimes in going into a conversation like that, we will concentrate ahead of time on what we want to communicate. This is what I want to tell them. This is what I want them to hear. This is what I want to convey. How much time do we spend prior to those conversations really drilling down on what do we want to discover? So
Yeah.
we going into that conversation, we may not know where their connection to the cause is. So rather than going in and just dumping all of this stuff, like, I just graduated Bible college and I'm excited and I don't have a lot of experience and God's called me to go here, and and we just start dumping all this stuff on them and then hoping that they'll respond in a positive way. What do I need to learn from them to even know where their connection to the cause is? So have I done the work ahead of time before that conversation to determine, I actually need to know, by the time I leave this conversation, I need to know these 3 things. Because if I've learned these 3 things, then that's going to help me better know how it is that I can ask them to connect in, and I can do that with more confidence. We would say, again, so much of, you can tell I've worked for Mission Increase for 6 years, right? Because so much of what it is that I talk about, but I would say that in a situation like that, I want to know what it is that I want for them as a result of this, not necessarily what it is that I want from them. And when I have spent the time to discover their connection to the cause, then the step that I ask them to take is going to be the right step.
Yeah.
And you're far more likely to get a yes when you ask the right person to take the right step at the right time. A blanket ask, the same ask of every person that you meet with, is not an appropriate ask.
Needs a little bit more nuance
It
and personalization.
needs more personalization. It needs more customization. It needs more knowledge of who is the champion, what's their connection to the cause. For instance, in a community here, you or any community that one of your graduates may be in, and they're going to talk to people, probably some of those people might be the parents of kids that they went to high school with.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's going to be a little bit of a different conversation, simply because now you're talking to somebody that they've got kids the age that you are, and they're understanding that dynamic a little bit differently. Or you might have somebody who grew up in the region and they've got that connection point there. Or you've got somebody who's a grandparent, or you have somebody who is a professional in the area and wants to see something happen here.
And all of those require a different approach.
All of those require just a little bit of customization. So what I would want to know going into a meeting with them is, what do I need to discover? What do I need to discover about them, the journey that God's taking them through, the calling that He's placed on their life? What do I need to know so that when I talk to them again, I will be able to come with more knowledge and more customization of what the right step would be to ask them to take. When you ask the right person to take the right step at the right time, you're far more likely to hear yes.
Wonderful. Okay. So I've developed a compelling vision. Mm-hmm. I've worked through my own fear of man issues, and I'm going with a posture of curiosity and discovery, rather than trying to kind of get through my pitch or my spiel. I've tried to think thoughtfully about the kind of person that I'm meeting and where they might be at, and ask a lot of insightful questions. And they say yes. Bless God, they say yes.
Hallelujah.
Okay, awesome. We've already talked a little bit about acknowledging that gift, thanking them, and then over time inviting them back into a process in which they take further next steps. Mm-hmm. What happens, though, if they say no? How should we respond? What kind of lessons can we learn from the no that we wouldn't get if we heard yes?
Okay. I would say that hearing no is not necessarily the end of the conversation. So oftentimes we would say no as, okay, that's a closed door, and we look on that with disappointment. So a couple of things. Number one is hearing no from one champion opens up the door to hear yes from another. So we have to look at it that way. We go back to the whole premise that we started with. Every act of asking, giving, and receiving is a statement about the faithfulness of God. We know that he's faithful. We know it is that he's going to provide. But when I say that hearing no is not necessarily the end of the conversation, it's still a process of discovery. Is it never? Is it not now? Is it not this project? Is it not this region? What do they mean by no? And it opens up another aspect of discovery. And quite frankly, we have an opportunity in no to still further that person. So let's say, for instance, someone says, no, I'm not interested in church planting. I'm all about human trafficking.
Sure.
Have you talked with this person? Because they're the best person in this region that's doing amazing stuff on human trafficking. Can I help connect you?
Oh, still being of service.
We're still being of service, and quite frankly, I believe without any doubt, God honors that.
Yeah.
I absolutely believe that he honors that.
Coming back to the anti-scarcity mentality.
Right.
That if
he honors that. And because my belief is that we do that and others are doing that. For instance, somebody from a human trafficking organization may be in conversation with somebody and they say, I get it, I understand that. My heart is to see young people released into ministry. I need to connect you with James at Canby Bible College because that's what they're all about, right? And so I believe that God does that in his kingdom. So that's number one with a no, right? It could be not this cause, then help connect him. It could be not now. Well, we've already established there's more than one way to be connected to a cause. So if it's not now financially, is it now in prayer? Is it now in serving? Is it now in learning more about the cause so that when their yes is a yes, it's a firm yes with full understanding of what it all means? Or is it not this project? Well, okay, so you want to see churches planted in regions. Where's the region that God's called you to? What's he placed on your heart? I can connect you with somebody. So we have to do that process of discovery because I don't think we're doing them any favors if we leave that conversation and simply put a period on it and walk out the door.
Or let our fear or self-doubt get the
Right.
best of us. And
Exactly.
say, yeah.
So, okay, I respect the fact that you said no. Can we just unpack that a little bit more?
Sure.
So tell me why. And I'm not trying to manipulate you and ask you to change your
course.
mind. I really do want to know.
Yeah.
So and quite frankly, you're going to get probably one of those responses.
Yeah.
We still have an obligation at that point to serve the people that we're working with, that we're meeting with. How can this conversation ultimately help fulfill the call that God's placed on their life?
There you go. I was reading a book last year. I think it was called Rejection Proof. And it was about this experiment that this guy did where he had tremendous fear issues. And so he decided to overcome that by putting himself intentionally in situations where he would be told no. And so he does all these very crazy kinds of things, and through it learns this process of how to respond. And he says most of the time that the person's rejection has more to do with them than it does to do with you.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, whenever you get the chance, stop and ask for a second. See if you can try to get them to explain why.
Mm-hmm.
And that information is so valuable in helping you understand, oh, it was because they weren't in the right frame of mind, or they had something else that was really, and there's all sorts of these things. Because often, like, those are, like, I would just think, like, I've been in situations like that and walking away, and suddenly I'm awashed with a feeling of self-doubt, and of course it's all my fault,
Right.
and this whole thing is going to come crashing down. And if we pause for a moment and let that kind of keep that anxiety at bay for a moment, we realize that actually there's more going on here than just our own perceptions of our own competencies.
Absolutely. And if I could really quickly interject 2 quick things. Number one is you hit on something really important right there. Because when we go into situations like this and we are focused on cause and vision for what it is that God's doing, where it is that he's headed, and that's how we focus our conversation, then when somebody says no, it's not a rejection of you. They didn't reject you. Quite frankly, it didn't really have anything to do with you.
Interesting.
Right? So we can walk into those situations with much more freedom, with much more confidence, because we know I'm not asking somebody to support me. And if they say no, they're saying no to me. I'm asking them to support a vision. And if they're saying no, it may be because God hasn't given them that same vision. But in essence, they're saying no to God and they're not saying no to me.
Yeah.
Right? So totally changes the circumstance there. So we walk into it with a great deal of freedom. But the second thing that I wanted to point out, and you brought this up, is we do have a tendency to go into these conversations with fear. And we do want to remove that earthly fear, that fear of man. We do want to be able to overcome that obstacle. I'm very quick to point out, though, that there is a godly fear that is always appropriate. And quite frankly, I don't want to coach that out of you. Because the bottom line is, when we're entering into conversations like this, if we truly understand that it's a sacred task, as we said early on, right? Fundraising, because of the liberating nature of generosity, asking somebody to give is a sacred task. And if we truly believe that quite frankly, in this situation, I'm on sacred ground, there's a godly fear that's really appropriate. And so I don't want to coach that out of you. I want you to go into a situation like that with the understanding of, God, this one's on you, and you've got to show up.
Wow.
Right?
That is the
it's not, God help me, right? I've got to go in and make this sell. Right? That's an earthly fear, right? So I don't want to go into those situations with an earthly fear of, if I don't do this right, I'm sunk. I want to go into it with a godly fear of, God, I've prepared. I've done what it is that you've called me to do. I feel like this is the right move at the right time for this particular person. You've got to show up. And that type of fear, always appropriate. And I don't want to see that go from people. I always want that.
Wonderful. Awesome. Kevin, this has been such a delight chatting with you. As we kind of come to a close, I want you to reflect a little bit on the years that you've spent working with a lot of ministry leaders. Do you observe any commonalities, leadership characteristics, traits that you see in leaders that allow them to be effective when it comes to development and fundraising?
Boy, great question. It's a loaded question.
Yes.
And to even be able to answer that in a concise manner will challenge everything I have going on in my mind right now, because there are so many things that I've seen. I do believe that the ministry leaders who are the most effective at this have been able to take themselves out of the equation and to realize this is godly work, and being able to ask people to connect in financially is just as much a ministry as the ministry to what I would call the end user of our program.
Sure.
So for me to say, let's say, for instance, let's go back to the example that I used of human trafficking. for me to recognize my ministry to the champions who are connecting into this cause as supporters and givers and prayers of this cause, my ministry to them is equal as the ministry to the end user of the program, of the girl who may be just coming out of trafficking.
Yeah.
So people who truly have the understanding of that ministry, in fact, again, with our transformational giving principles, we would say that ministry leaders have a dual calling: to steward the mission and shepherd the people. And when you look at that dual calling and recognize my ministry to the champions of this organization is equal, it changes the entire equation. And I recently had the opportunity to sit down with several ministry leaders and really ask them some in-depth probing questions. And in that process, one of the central themes that came out of that, from all of these ministry leaders who've been doing this for a while, one of the central themes that came out was, I have such a responsibility to the champions. And that is a mindset shift that when people first come into connection with Mission Increase, we'll work with the very first thing. So we have to shift a mindset before we can impart a skill.
Yeah.
And so it's that mindset shift. And even one of the ministry leaders that I was talking with this week, when we first started working with her, it was work on her as a leader and the whole mindset shift. And even she said in this conversation this week, can you believe I'm saying this? Because she recognizes the change that's there, and she's excited about it. She knows this happened. And that to me is what gets me so incredibly excited to get up every day and go do what it is that I have the privilege of doing, is because I see ministry leaders doing that. So to answer your question, number one thing, it's the mindset of the responsibility to the end user and the champion is the same. And the other thing I would say, I would just reiterate what it is that we've already talked about today. Fundraising is ministry.
Yeah.
Asking somebody to give is ministry in and of itself. And when we recognize it as that, it transforms us, it transforms how we do this, and it transforms the asks that we make. So truly, the best practices, the skill set, the concepts that I see in ministry leaders who I believe are really hitting it out of the park in this area. Ministry to champions and end users is equal, and to recognize that fundraising is ministry.
Love it. Any final words of wisdom or encouragement for young leaders exploring the world of fundraising and development for the first time?
It's all about vision. It's all about the vision. And what is it that God's doing? What's he going to do through this? What's his plan? What's his work? And then to connect with people who have a like mind in that. For instance, just today on a call, we were talking with all of the area directors for Mission Increase, and we're talking about some upcoming training that we're going to be doing, and talking about connecting people and how do we find people who might be interested in our cause, and all of those things. And one concept that actually came out from that conversation today that I've been pondering is, you're looking for people who are looking for you. So it's not going out and beating the pavement and trying to find all of these people and convince them that what you're doing is a really great thing, and hopefully they'll buy in and hopefully they'll give financially. Your job is to find the people and connect with the people that are looking to connect with someone like you. They're looking for somebody who's making change in this area, and they want to partner with that person. That's who it is that you're looking for.
Kevin, I love it. Where can people find out more information about you and the Mission Increase Foundation?
Okay, so Mission Increase, our website, so mif.org. You can look up Mission Increase. And my contact, if you're looking in the Oregon area, my contact information will come up for that.
Sure.
So again, anything that we can do to help you in that, we want to be able to do. And from the website, you can send me any type of email, any type of contact, and I would love to go ahead and connect with you and be able to help you in this process.
I know that I have benefited greatly from our conversations over coffee and in the workshops that I've attended with you. Very grateful for your work here in the Oregon and especially the Portland metro area. So thank you for being a coach and a champion to all of us.
And
out
you are
there.
very welcome.